Good afternoon. My name is Lori Quakenbush. I work for the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, and I have for more than 20 years in the capacity of the lead for the Arctic Marine Mammal Program. And my topic today is to ask the question and try to answer the question, are marine mammals in Arctic Alaska responding to warmer waters and less sea ice? And I'm going to start by talking about what does the Arctic Marine Mammal Program do? And what we do is we work with Alaska subsistence hunters to study species important to Alaska natives for food. That's a focus that we have with the marine mammals that we study. And of course, rapid changes in the Arctic are of concern to people of Alaska that depend on marine mammals. And so our focus is to monitor species for impacts of environmental changes by collecting and analyzing things that we can measure that could affect population size. So that's how we go about answering these questions and seeing what we can do to understand the system. So what are things we can measure that could affect population size? One of them is changes in movements or distribution, and you've heard some talk about that already today with zooplankton and fish. Changes in diet, body condition, reproduction, age at maturity, and survival. So these are things that can help us understand if populations are going up and down and things we need to pay attention to. We also look at changes in behavior relative to changes in habitat and actual changes in population size. So, marine mammals are extremely difficult to study. There's challenges in all kinds of places. You saw from Ebet's talk that the Bering, Chukchi, and Beaufort Sea are three major regions. This is sort of my backyard, our study area. These are the places that we work, the Bering Sea, the Chukchi Sea, and the Beaufort Sea, and the marine mammal populations. It's a large area. Marine mammals are underwater. They're under ice cover. We're working in areas with short days, harsh weather, and so we're working with animals that are not visible to actually research. So what are the tools we can use to answer these questions and look at what's going on? We use satellite telemetry, and we can use that to look at changes in movements and distribution. We can sample the subsistence harvest to look at changes in diet, body condition, reproduction, age at maturity, and survival. We can use wildlife detection dogs and instruments to look at changes in behavior relative to habitat. And we can use environmental DNA to look at actual changes in population size. So we use satellite telemetry to look at bowhead whale movements and distribution. And bowheads are extremely important subsistence species for coastal Alaskans. You'll hear more about that at WhaleFest in the next couple of days. And we work with subsistence whalers to attach satellite tags to bowhead whales. And this is super important. Being able to work with the whalers is really critical to the success of tagging bowheads. We have whalers that are driving boats that know how to approach bowheads, know how to find them, and then once we get them, getting the tags on safely and very accurately. And so the whalers have been huge in this work. And you can see the bowhead here. Here's the satellite transmitter, pretty small relative to the size of the whale. It sits just under the skin. And it is a tag that transmits a signal to satellites, and when two or more satellites get the signal, it will send back a location from that animal, and it does it at a set amount of transmission rate. And so we get that information by logging onto a website. It tells us how often and where the whale has been located. So the map on the upper left is the tracks of 15 different bowheads between August and December 2006 to 2008 that had carried transmitters. Each of the red arrows is a location of an individual whale. And so they don't transmit all the time, but they do transmit fairly frequently. The red arrows are actual locations of whales from these 15. And to use these data to understand movements and locations in time and space, we can look at the density. And so if you look at near Point Barrow in August through November, there's lots of red dots there. And then if you look at the map down here, this is just September. And so most of the whales' locations in September were near Point Barrow. So the brighter color, the orange, we call this a heat map. The cooler colors are fewer whales in that area at that time, and the warmer colors are the more whales in that area at the time. And these figures are from a paper that we published in 2010 looking at where bowhead whales travel and what their distribution is. So we use this analysis and this type of data to look at where bowhead whales were wintering in 2009 through 2016, which is pretty normal sea ice extent. You can see the ice extent here. Yvette talked about that and what the ice in the Bering Sea. So this was what we called pretty normal. Bowhead whales were wintering on the western side of the Bering Sea, and mostly in this hot spot right here. Then in 2017, we saw some warm temperatures coming in, the ice edge having a kind of a chunk out of it right where that dense area was, where the bowheads were wintering. So it would look like this. So up until 2017, the ice edge was below the hot spot. Now it's intruded into it. So the question is, without any ice in the main part of bowhead wintering area, where would the bowheads go? Would they stay there or move north or east or west? Well, in 2017, we didn't have any transmitters out, so we don't know exactly what they did in that year. And we didn't even really know what to speculate. Bowheads are really good with ice, and they don't need it in the summertime, but they're very good with heavy ice when it's there. So in 2018, as you heard from Yvette, the ice was even of less extent in the Bering Sea and basically took out what we knew of as the entire wintering area for bowheads. And luckily, in 2018, we had 4 transmitters, and this is what the bowheads did. So for wintering in 2018, when there was very little ice in the Bering Sea, they moved north. And we don't know why they did this. We don't know if it's food related. We don't know if for some reason they want to be with the ice in the wintertime for other reasons, but this is what they did. So in 2019, it was cooler. We had more ice in the Bering Sea than we had in 18 and 17, and the whales moved back down to the south, not quite as far as they were before, but their more dense wintering area now is still in the Bering Sea and not in the Chukchi. So we could use satellite telemetry to show bowhead whales moved their wintering area into the Chukchi Sea in years of low ice in the Bering Sea. But how do we know if it matters? So even though they moved, is that a cost to them? Is there some reason why that's not a good thing for bowheads? And how do we answer that question? Well, because bowhead whales are harvested for subsistence every year, blubber thickness can be measured to see if whales were skinnier during those low ice years or not. And because we can do this, we found that there was no evidence that that shift north in the winter has decreased body condition for bowhead whales. So even though they made this move, we don't have an indication that it's a problem for them. So in answer to the question, are bowhead whales responding to warmer waters and less ice? The answer is yes. Bowheads wintered farther north in years with less sea ice, but we don't have any evidence that this is a problem or that it's caused decrease in body condition. So the next tool that we use to understand what's going on with marine mammals and climate is samples from the subsistence harvest. And this is a scene from Point Hope in the springtime. They have a large bearded seal harvest each spring where many members of the community are involved in harvesting of bearded seals. And we're there too to help with the sampling. And from the sampling, we can monitor the health and status of ice seals through samples collected in these coastal communities. So first, let's talk about what is an ice seal. And species of seals that associate with ice during some part of the year we call ice seals or ice-associated seals. We have 4 species in Alaska: ringed, bearded, spotted, and ribbon. And they are important subsistence species as well. The skins of the bearded seals are used for skin boats to hunt bowheads. The meat is dried and used in lots of ways, cooked and used in other ways. The blubber is rendered into oil, which is hugely important in a lot of the villages along the coast. Bearded seal skin is made into the soles of mucklucks and parka and muckluck trim. So there's lots and lots of uses for seals in the coastal communities. This is a close-up of the bearded seal skin. This is 3 different skins that are being sewed together to cover the boat, the umiak boat that's used for whaling, and just to show the stitching that goes into putting those skins together. And it's done in such a way with ring seal oil along this, the sinew so that the seam is waterproof, which of course you would want for your boat cover. And then once the covers come off the boats for whaling, they often get used for blanket toss to celebrate the harvest of the whale. And this is a blanket toss at Point Hope after a successful whaling season. You can see all the nice mucklucks here. So the bottoms of those mucklucks are bearded seal hides, and then the white trim is often ring seal, bleached ring seal skins that are cut and dyed in patterns. So ring seals, one of the ice seals that we talk about, is the most abundant. This seal is probably the most abundant seal in probably the world, but definitely the Arctic. They're the most ice adapted. You can see from its claws here in this picture, very strong claws they use for scratching and maintaining breathing holes in the ice. They haul out on ice and in layers, and a lair is a snow cave that the ring seals make to give birth to their pups and also to rest in the winter. The pups are born in a white lanugo coat. It's a kind of a fuzzy, long, kinky haired coat that protects them in air from cold air. It's not good in water, but they try to stay in air until they get their fat layer. And ring seals are, like I said, pretty much circumpolar, but definitely highly abundant in the Bering, Chukchi, and Beaufort Seas in Alaska. And this is looking at a ring seal breathing hole from the surface. So the seal has actually dug out all the way through the hole and come up on top. And they do this in the springtime to bask in the sun. It helps them grow their new coat when they molt. And then here's a schematic or a diagram, basically, of a lair. And so some of the breathing holes get covered with snow because the wind will drift snow over some deformation in the ice. And some of these breathing holes then become lairs, and the seals will crawl out, dig the snow out, have their pups, and haul out in those lairs. We'll talk more about the lairs in a bit later too. And this is a male ring seal, and we know it's an adult male because of the dark face during the breeding season. In the springtime, the males get these really dark faces, and so we know that's a breeding male. Bearded seals are also very ice adapted. These are the biggest of the 4 species of ice seal. They haul out on ice mostly, but they will occasionally haul out on land in the summertime. They give birth on ice, and the pups are born in brown lanugo, not white lanugo. They have a lanugo coat, but it's brown. And bearded seals are found throughout the Bering, Chukchi, and Beaufort Sea as well. And they're called bearded seals, and this is probably why. They have long whiskers that scientists call vibrissae. But if you look at this seal closely, those are not his beard. It's actually a mustache, so I'm not sure we should be calling them bearded seals or not. But they use their whiskers because they're benthic feeders, and they feed along the bottom, and so the whiskers are really helpful in them finding food along the bottom. Spotted seals are slightly ice adapted, less adapted to ice than bearded and ringed seals are. They'll haul out on ice in the springtime and wintertime, but they haul out on land a lot in the summertime. And pups are born in white indigo, and you'll see spotted seals in the Bering Sea in the wintertime, Chukchi and Beaufort Seas more in the summer as the ice retreats. And ribbon seals are slightly ice adapted as well. Similar to spotted seals, neither spotted seals nor ribbon seals will maintain breathing holes like bearded and ringed seals can. Ribbon seals haul out on ice, give birth on ice, where pups are also with white shaggy coats. And ribbon seal distribution is more specific to Bering and Chukchi seas. We don't see them in the Beaufort, and they're actually fairly rare in Alaskan waters. So this species is not harvested to much extent. We don't get as much data on them from the harvest. They stay more in the Bering Sea and more on the Russian side of the Bering Sea. This is an adult male. That color pattern of dark and light, really black with white bands or white ribbons, as the ribbon seal's called. The female, you don't see the pictures of them as often because they're not quite as striking. The females, the black part is brown and the white part is yellow, so much more muted color. You still see the banding, but it's not nearly as dramatic as the males. So how many seals are we talking about in the Bering, Chukchi, and Beaufort Seas? So basically off of Alaska, these 4 species. And there's a lot of them. So for ring seals, we think there's 600,000 or so in the Chukchi Sea alone, and that comes from aerial surveys that are flown by NOAA. And ring seals were listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act in 2012. And that was due to their predicted response in declining declining sea ice and snow because of the layers. And so it was thought that ring seals are dependent enough on ice that as the ice goes away, these seals are going to become threatened to be endangered by the year 2100. So bearded seals, I think there's about 500,000 or so of them in the Bering, Chukchi, Beaufort Seas. And they were also listed as threatened in 2012 due to their predicted response to sea ice loss. So spotted seals, we don't have a good recent estimate for those, but there's probably more than 400,000. And ribbon seals, like I said, we know least about them, but there's probably close to 200,000 there. So the harvest that we're talking about that we sample from is a very sustainable harvest. The subsistence harvest doesn't come anywhere close to being a problem for the populations of seals that we have, ice seals that we have in Alaska. So what samples and measurements do we take? We can take physical measurements, looking at blubber thickness, and we can take length to look at growth. We can look at female reproductive tracts to tell us how often adult females are having pups and what their age at maturity is, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. We collect teeth for aging, so we can count the annuli and see how old each of these seals are and associate the data that we get with the age of the seal. We can collect stomachs and see what they've been eating. And we do other collections as well, tissues for contaminants, colon contents for harmful algal blooms. We're not going to talk about contaminants or harmful algae today. So when we're looking at blubber thickness, and that's our indication of body condition, so the question is, are seals skinnier or fatter now than they have been in the past? And here we have all 4 species stacked on each other. The 0 line across the middle is the average. And so you saw some similar plots like this in the earlier talks. So blue, in this case, is above average, dots are average, and red is below average. So what we're looking for here in a plot like this in a pattern is if we see sustained red dots or below average body condition in the 2000s when we know sea ice has been going away. And we don't see that. Anytime we have red dots, we have a rebound, basically, of back to average or blue. The two places where we have seen ring seals have had below average body condition in the 2010-12 and again in 17-18, those both correlate to unusual mortality events that have been reported for seals. And one, the 2010 one, was related to a disease that was never actually identified. So there was a die-off and also 6 seals that didn't die, but we saw issues with hair loss and some other problems in 2010 and 12. And we could see that indeed seals were having some body condition issues. They were responding to whatever that was going on in the environment. And then the 2017-18 was the low ice years in the Bering Sea that Yvette talked about and that we saw for when bowheads moved there. So we are seeing signals that there are some issues in the recent, but they've rebounded back after that. So we're not seeing sustained decreases in body condition from these data. The other thing we can look at is growth. And growth is interesting in that seals and other mammals tend to put all their energy into growth early on until they become a size where they can reproduce. And then the energy goes into reproduction. So growth is an important thing if you can measure it. And what we see from the data going back to 1940, and it goes back to 1940 because we're using the birth year of the seals. So these data come from, say if the seal was harvested in 2010 and it was 10 years old, we're taking these data back to its birth year. So all the seals born in 2000 are compared against each other. And that tells us whether seals were growing faster as pups in 2000 or slower. So it's a measure of a good birth year versus a bad birth year for growth. And if you look at this plot, you see pretty tight, a little bit and below average, zero's average here as well. And the error bars show you that all of these data are pretty close together. And then in the 2000s, we have a lot more variability. So some seals are growing faster, some seals are growing slower, but overall they're all above the average mark. So we're seeing faster growing seals now in the 2000s. So indicating that growth has been above average in these more recent years. So here we're looking at the age at maturity, and this is related to the growth, because remember I said that seals are putting energy into growth until they're old enough to reproduce, and then they're putting their energy into reproduction. So that's what this actually agrees with that, in that we have seals that, if we look at ring seals, we have seals in the 1960s, seals in the 1970s and 80s that weren't mature until they were 6 years old. And then in the 2000s, we have seals that mature at 3 years old. So this is an indication that in recent years, ring seals are maturing younger, and that's an indication of good growth, good body condition, and lower age at maturity. For those of you that are interested in what all these numbers and letters mean, the number on top of the error bars is the number of actual data points that went into this decade of data. So 103 ring seals were analyzed for this. And the A means that all of these were related to each other or not statistically significant, but they are from the Bs. So the letters tell you a difference statistically, and the number on top just tells you how many points went into those. Don't need to know any of that to look at this graph and understand what's going on, but if you are interested in what those mean. So for maturity, what we see in our data now from the 60s to the 2020s is the age of maturity is the same or younger now than it has been in the past. So when we look at pregnancy rate, and that's the other thing, these seals can have 1 pup per year, no twinning. They can certainly reproduce less than that, but they can have 1 pup per year. And so when we look at the numbers of females that are pregnant in any given year, and here we're combining them into decades, we're not seeing any decline in the pregnancy rates. The pregnancy rates are remaining high. Some of them are higher now than they were in the past, like bearded seals, and others are pretty similar. So, but the take home here is that pregnancy rate is the same or higher in the 2000s. So how long do ice seals live? And because we collect the teeth and we can get the teeth red, then we can tell how old they are. And so we've seen seals into their 40s, except for ribbon seals. And we're not sure whether that's because we don't see as many ribbon seals as we have before. I'm looking at my time here. Okay, I'm gonna skip a few slides. Not sure where they all went. The other really important thing that we see is the proportion of pups in the harvest, and that is showing us that even if the productivity rate was good and seals are maturing at a younger age and blubber thickness is good, if pups don't survive, we're not going to have a population that's maintaining itself. And we're seeing that the pups in the harvest has gone up. So signs of a declining population would be skinny, slow growth rate, older age at maturity, low pregnancy rate, pups not surviving. But what we're seeing are fat seals, fast growth rate, younger age of maturity, high pregnancy rate, lots of pup in the harvest. So currently, conditions are not negatively affecting ice seals. The most negative effects have occurred in the past during heavy ice years. And this is one of the situations where we know more about how ice seals survive with ice than we do without it. And so far, so good. So one of the other tools that we use are wildlife detection dogs and instruments in seal lairs to see how the seals are doing. So, as I told you, they have breathing holes in lairs, and they're not visible from the surface. And so we need another way to look at and find seals. And so we do this with trained dogs that are trained to find the scent of seals. And here's our 2 dogs headed out to go find a ring seal hole. We run them ahead of the snow machines with winds quartering from left or right, and they're just basically running and feeding in on the scent coming from one direction. You saw the dog just turn to the right. And then if we move the snow machine over, they'll correct with the snow machine. So that was a little bit of what was going on there. They can cover a lot of ground in a day. And that's really helpful. Some of these areas aren't very high, dense in seal structures, and so we need the dogs to be able to help us cover ground like this and find the seal holes. So we're probably going about 7 to 10 miles an hour here as the dogs are working, and that dog just alerted. And now we're going even faster. And usually it's faster than we want to drive the snow machine over sea ice. This seal was actually a basking seal. You'll see a little black dot out there. The dogs did not see it when they started. The dot just went down, but that's what they were after. Okay, do I need to stop there? Nope, I'm good. Okay, so here's what the hole looks like. Okay. Here's what the hole looks like that the seal just went down and the dogs are looking at it. Oh yeah, okay. So this is, okay, now I gotta get the video to go. Okay, we'll skip that one. So this was our study area. We we used the dogs to survey in 2022 and 2023, and this is right in Prudhoe Bay, so it's an industrial area. We're trying to look at whether the density of seal structures has changed through time, and we can go back to 1983 and compare snow depths and different things, but there's an interest in whether the snow really is less with the warmer temperatures, whether there's a difference in seal structures or not. And this is just a ring seal looking out of its hole. Here's the schematic again of the seal layer, and the sealing depth over the top is what's keeps it insulated, keeps the pups warm. Here's the instruments that we use. We have cameras, a temperature sensor, and a light sensor. And the temperature sensor has a temperature probe above and below. So we can look at the temperature, the air temperature going up and down, and then the temperature inside the layer is very stable because the seawater is like just below zero or just below freezing, and the snow above insulates that layer. So then if we have a seal haul out in a layer, you can see the temperature come up and down. So this is a record of 4 different haul outs where the seal came out into its lair and spent some time there. In 2022 and 2023, the cameras showed us that seals would come out and sleep in the hole without coming all the way out into the lair. So the temperature probes were not showing us a haul out, but the cameras were showing us that these seals were sleeping in the holes. And they were sleeping in those holes for 30 minutes to 10 and a half hours at a time. And so this was not behavior that we had documented before. We don't know if it's new or if it's something that they've always done, but it really changes up kind of what we know about how seals are using layers and what they're doing there. We also put cameras outside basking holes so we could see the activity when the holes were opened up. And remember I told you the males have the black faces. Here's a male and a female together in the same hole. I'm gonna skip this next one. Some more views of layers from the inside. This is the hole where the seal would come out of, and this is a dish. They melt the dish when they haul out inside the layer, so you can see kind of where they've been laying. This is a pupping layer. You can see the claw marks on the roof where the pup has been scratching at the roof of the layer, and then claw marks again at the breathing hole, because that is something that's how they maintain their holes and keep them open. This is just a comparison. The densities have been about the same from year to year, but the snow depth was quite a bit different. And the number of layers that we saw in 2023 when snow depth was low was also low. And we're going to be out there again this year to sort of see what the snow depth is and what the density is, and see what we can learn about what they're responding to, whether snow depth is really making the difference there. So here's our research buddies, Stout and Indigo. They're brother-sister black labs, and they're really good at their jobs, and they're fun to work with. So our ring seals responding to warmer waters and less ice. We don't really know with the amount of data that we have, but we're going to keep looking and see what we can find after another field season. And we're also using environmental DNA, or eDNA. So this is, and we're looking at actual changes in population size, or trying to use it as a tool for that. And so we're doing this with polar bears, and we've been able to use DNA from that are shed from their paws when they're walking in snow in their paw prints. So we've been using the DNA left behind in paw prints to identify individual bears. And this has become important because helicopters have been used in the past mostly to study polar bears. And in a lot of places and times we can't do that anymore. So the helicopters can't land in places that bears are going, the ice is too thin, and it's become unsafe to do that sort of research, capturing and collaring. And there's also been an outcry from hunters and some other groups about using chemical mobilization and satellite collars, and so other methods that are less invasive have been of interest. So we're collecting the top layer of snow that's scooped out of the paw prints and put in a container and kept frozen, and then we melt the snow, pull it through a filter, send the filter to an environmental DNA lab at the University of Idaho, and the DNA gets amplified, and you can identify individual bears. You can tell what sex the bear is from the DNA, and you can look at the size of the paw prints and know whether you've got a female with cubs or some other combination. Then you can look at these genetically identified bears and use them in some common mark recapture sampling designs to estimate population size. So during 2021 to 23, we collected snow near Wainwright, Uktiavik, Prudhoe Bay, Kaktovik, and 36% of 104 sets of tracks, actually we were able to identify those individual bears by genotyping. We had some other sample types that we worked to, hair works, saliva works, and we're combining all of those to try to get as much information as we can about polar bears. And so using all these sample types in all years, we've identified 57 polar bears, and 41 of them were males and 16 were females. And this is really valuable because in the past, only female polar bears could be collared because their necks are thinner than their heads. Male bears have a neck that's wider than their heads, so the collars just slip off. So it's been really hard to get information about male polar bears, but from DNA, and I'm not sure why we're sampling more males than females, but we are, and that's been really, really valuable. Now we're getting some information about males. 19 of the 57 bears we were able to identify had been recaptured, 2 of which were recaptured 12 years apart. So that's really valuable too. So are polar bears responding to warmer waters and less ice? We can't answer this question, but we have a tool now that we can use that's going to allow us to get at that. So overall, are marine mammals in Arctic Alaska responding to warmer waters and less sea ice? Bowheads are from their wintering areas, but we can't find a negative effect of them doing that. Ice seals are responding, but the response so far is not negative. Ring seals in Prudhoe Bay, whether they're responding to their habitat or not is inconclusive. We need more data for that. Polar bears as well, we need more data, but we have a tool that we can use. So with that, I just want to show you a crew picture. This is my staff at Arctic Marine Mammal Program, some of the things that we do, and our acknowledgements. All the funding agencies that help us do this work. While there's questions, I have a video that can just play by itself.
Okay.
So this is Stout and Anna looking down a seal hole, and they're going to take us all the way down and back up. Am I seeing any questions? Oh.
Wait for the microphone.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I'm sorry if I missed it, how long have you been working with dogs to find these seals?
So dogs have been used to find seals since the Inuit in Canada unhooked a dog from a dog sled and used them to find the seal holes and then hunted at that seal hole. And in Alaska, one of the biologists from here must have been the 1970s, went to Canada and learned from biologists there, and then it's been in use in Alaska for decades now. Personally, I started in the 80s using dogs, and we've just started using them again for these projects. We actually have 2 pups in training right now, so we may have 4 dogs in camp next year. Yes, we train them ourselves. Yeah.
Is there a reason that the ribbon seals aren't very common over here as to Russia, or?
Ribbon seals, why aren't they, or is there a reason why they're not so common over here? They're a deep diver, so they're probably want to be closer to the shelf break in the Bering Sea, closer to the south and of the Bering Sea. But it could be water currents, it could be, we don't know very much about what they eat. When we get them in the subsistence harvest, their stomachs are usually empty. So there's just a lot of things we don't know about them. The Russians did have a commercial harvest for them for a while, but we think they like the heavier ice that tends to form and stay longer over in the Russian side of the Bering Sea. But that's a good question, and we don't really know the answer to that.
Do you have any hypotheses or even just speculation about why the bowed whales and the ice seals have been positively impacted?
Why they have been positively impacted? I think that heavy ice years of the past were difficult for seals, for sure. Bowheads, I think, are very well adapted to the ice in general. We see when we first started tagging bowheads in 2006, 2008, they were in very heavy ice in the Bering Sea in the winter without a problem at all. When they migrate in the spring, we didn't talk about that here, but when they migrate in the spring, they cross the Beaufort Sea from west to east in May, which is when there's some of the heaviest ice you could have in the Beaufort Sea, and they just go right through it west to east, no problem. Bowheads probably don't need to eat every year. so a year or two, and we think they are eating in the winter, they're probably able to sustain that kind of thing, pack on enough fat that they may not need to eat all year long. But for seals, we think the heavy ice years were actually hard for them, and that these lighter ice years so far are not a problem. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
We'll do one more question.
Okay, one more question.
Hi, thank you for your talk.
Where are you?
I'm back here.
Okay.
Thank you. Just a question about polar bears. That research is fascinating with the DNA and the tracking. And could you speak to the status of the Beaufort Sea polar bears that I think are still threatened, and how there's an increasing trend for them to den on land?
Yes, I can talk a bit about that. So all polar bears are listed as threatened. We have two species or two subpopulations in Alaska, the Chukchi Sea and the southern Beaufort Sea populations. We're kind of using the eDNA for mostly the Beaufort Sea. Most of our samples are in what would be the southern Beaufort Sea stock. So I'm just reporting on the work that we do today. But Fish and Wildlife Service and USGS are doing a lot of the other research about the status of the polar bear subpopulations. We're seeing a lot of reports from the oil companies about females with cubs of the year that are fat, females with 2 juveniles from last year, and 2-year-olds that are all fat. I mean, I think right now we're seeing some really positive indications that the Beaufort Sea bears are doing well, probably better than that they have in the recent past. So that's a good indication, but I'm not the one looking at those data specifically. What was the other part of your question?
Just that they are threatened, and I was curious if there's been a change in stats.
Yeah. So they were listed as threatened as well because of how ice dependent they are. Not so much population decline, having been seen, but just anticipating their response. They are spending more time on land. They are denning more on land. But a lot of the indications of how body condition and how well they're doing, they're still actually doing probably better than people thought they would be doing. And one of the things that we worked with Fish and Wildlife Service, USGS, using our seal data from our seal blubber thickness data, because that's what bears are eating. They're eating ring seals and bearded seals. In years that the seals were doing well, the bears also did well, so we were able to see a link between our blubber thickness data and what they were seeing with bears. And so there definitely is a link between healthy seals and healthy bears, and right now that's doing well for both. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much, Lori, and thanks for those questions.